Hey everybody, FIDE Master Dennis Monokroussos here, and today we finish our look at the Open Ruy Lopez. Not the whole Open Ruy, not the whole Ruy, but at least we get the Open Ruy over and done with. And this is a really complex set of lines we're going to look at today. So we get to our basic starting position of the Open Ruy, which is this, and we looked at Queen E2 first, then we looked at Bishop to E3, we looked at Knight B to D2, and we looked at C3, Bishop C5 lines last time. So this time we're going to take a look at variations that begin with C3 and now either Knight to C5 or Bishop to E7. So Bishop E7 or Knight C5. And this can also arise via the Knight B to D2 move order. So Knight C5, C3, and now instead of D4, which we looked at a few weeks ago, either Bishop to G4 or Bishop to E7. One of the things that's a little bit frustrating about this, at least until you kind of get the hang of it, is just how many different transpositional possibilities there really are in these systems. So it can be a bit overwhelming, at least from an organizational standpoint, but really the same lines pop up over and over again, and after a while you get the hang of them. Alright, so C3, we'll look at it this way, and now we'll start off with Bishop to E7. Again, Bishop C5 was the subject of the last episode. Alright, sorry, so Bishop to E7, Knight B to D2. Okay, now here Black has two main tries. He can either castle or play Knight to C5. So let's start with castles here. And this one kind of goes off in an independent direction. Okay, Bishop to C2. Very important to try to undermine this knight. I mean, it's a very good piece, and White would like to get rid of it. Also, White, by dropping the bishop back to C2, is clearing the B3 square for this knight in many cases. And he'd like to then play here, and both fight for some queenside squares, but also frees the queen to come to H5. Okay, that's not going to happen very often, but it does free the F-pawn to roll as well. Alright, so Black plays F5, solidifying the knight. Okay, White plays Knight to B3, Queen D7, protecting the bishop on E6 in advance, so that now after Knight F to D4 takes, in case of Knight takes D4, which we'll come back to in a moment, Black is ready with C5. Alright, if White plays C takes D4, this is an alternative, and it's kind of reminiscent of the Catalan, among other openings, where White is trying to clamp down on the C5 square. If he can do this successfully, he's got real chances for an edge. So Black fights for the C5 square with A5. He wants to play A4 and kick the knight off before it's really ready to leap into the C5 square safely. So F3, and you can see the battle is afoot. It's underway. If the knight went back to G5, well, in that case, White can play Bishop takes G5 and Knight to C5, and the knight is going to stay, and then even F4. In fact, let me just show you this instead of rattling on about it. So takes, Knight C5, Queen somewhere, maybe, well, you go to E7, the bishop is a little bit awkward, so maybe F7, I mean, you go to C6, but then you're walking onto the C file, so maybe Queen F7, F4, Bishop E7. Okay, actually that may not be quite so bad for Black, because I really want to have a rook. I want to keep the file open. I want to have C5 accessible to my pieces. But I can't put a rook on C1, obviously, as long as the bishop's pointing it from G5. So here. Maybe I should just take, play Bishop to D3, let's say C6, and now rook to C1, or something along these lines. And White should have some kind of nagging edge here. So I don't think that Knight to G5 is best. And maybe there's even better than what I came up with, but that at least looks like a start. So A4, this is a much more direct approach, and I think a better one. So F takes E4, A takes B3, Bishop B3, F E4, Bishop E3, Black can swap, and now play either C6 immediately. Okay, White puts the rook on C1, but this should be about equal. It's difficult for White to make any progress really on the C file, and both of White's bishops are kind of underperforming. Really, all four bishops on the board are not really doing a whole bunch. So Rook F8 also is possible, and then C6. So this is all equal, and what I take this to mean is that C takes D4 is a bit too slow for White. Slow in the sense that White just is not really ready to exploit any potential advantage on the C file. So Knight takes D4 is the main move. Okay, now C5 takes, Queen takes, F3, Knight G5, A4, Rook A to D8. All this has taken place many times. Takes. And now the main move here is Rook to A7, but Queen E2 is perhaps worth a look as well, hitting the B5 pawn. C4, okay, Bishop to E3, taking control over the diagonal. And, of course, queen e5 is impossible because white plays f4, forking the queen and the knight. So queen c6, again fighting for the c5 square. Queen f2, f4. Oh, by the way, queen f2 is a novelty, so no one's played this, but I think it's a good move. Although, it's probably not good enough for an advantage. So f4, bishop d4, and now either rook a8 contesting the a file, or knight e6. And I think both moves should be sufficient for equality. So instead of queen e2, rook a7, as I said, is the main move. Rook d7, takes, and here white has tried various possibilities. The main move here is bishop to e3, but in a very important game last year, Sergei Karyakin played f4 against Polgar, and this was played in the World Cup. I think this is the second game. I think Polgar had won game 1 in Berlin, if I recall correctly, and Karyakin needed to win this game. And he had some chances for an edge, but it didn't pan out. So anyway, after f4, knight e4, here Karyakin played bishop takes e4, but bishop to e3 might be a good move. Anyway, he played takes, f5, so very direct. And now, of course, the reason why bishop to e3 might be a good move is that black plays d4, and so we have this race between white's attempt to smash open black's king side and black's attempt to just crash through the middle of the board. Now here Polgar played g takes f6, which I think is not the best move. I think the best move is bishop to d8, and the following line is possible. Bishop to e3, and this is probably why Polgar rejected it, because after d3, white is grabbing the c5 pawn. But oddly enough, it seems that that black is still in good shape. After rook f7, queen b3, threatening e6, queen c6. So this is a very good move here, simply not fearing e6. White should play it anyway. Takes. Now queen c4. And here, it's white who has to be careful. I mean, the black king it's kind of tough to get at him. You can try. And queen a3, I think, is the only really good move here. If you go into the endgame, you're probably just losing. So queen a3, threatening to check on f8 or maybe a7, but f8 certainly looks more attractive. And believe it or not, queen to d5. And there doesn't seem to be any way for white to win this. So the bishop on d8 is protected, f7 is covered, g8 is covered, f5 is covered, and additionally, black is ready to resume pushing the pawns. So this is a scary variation to play, no doubt about that. But I think black is all right here. Anyway, you can see that this is certainly a practical weapon for white in either case. In the game, Polgar played g takes f6, which is certainly a bit more sane, given what we just saw. Certainly, if you're facing a surprise, as f4 was. So bishop h6, rook f7, and then here, instead of whatever it was Karyakin did, I forget what it is, I think queen to e1 would have given him some decent chances, and it would have had an edge at this point. Okay, so that line I think is certainly worth further exploration, and it's, again, very dangerous for black. I mean, even in the bishop to d8 line from back here, black really has to cross a minefield to survive. All right, the main move, though, is bishop to e3. And now, knight e6, putting the knight in ideal blockading position, f4, g6, and here white's tried various moves. I think g4 and g3, and even queen f3. In fact, queen f3 was played in a game involving a friend of mine, a correspondence game, or an email game. So that ended quickly. My friend got his draw with black. d4, rook to d1, queen c8, bishop f2, takes, queen a8, queen e3, and in a game between B. Gonzalez and Alex Herrera, ICCF email in 2007, draw was agreed. All right, so that was that game. g3. Okay, this has been tried too at a high level over the board game, or in a high level over the board game, between Gashimov and Sutovsky, and this ended in a draw as well. So rook d8, bishop f2, d4, so black breaks in the center, and clearly this is just a dead draw. Okay, I guess there was a 30 move rule or something, so they went to move 32 and called it a day. Alright, so finally though, the best move I think is g4. This is played in a game between Alcina Leal and Lanzani in Barcelona in 2009. I think it's still close to equal, but maybe white has a little something here. Alright, so that I think is perhaps the best objectively for white, but again, Karyakin's f4 is quite interesting. Well, it hasn't been tried since then, although I'm not sure how often this position in general has arisen since that point. Okay, so that disposes of one particular line, this line with castles followed by f5. So back we go here. And now we move on to knight to c5, bishop c2, and here it's another choice time. Okay, d4 is one choice, bishop to g4 is the other. Alright, so d4, and here white can try between three moves, although two of them come to the same thing. So both knight e4 and knight to b3 work out to be the same, because after d3, white then takes on c5, and obviously the same thing will happen with the knight to b3 first move. So let's take a look at the third option first. C takes d4. Knight d4, takes, knight f3, takes, castles. And here white has tried a couple of moves. I think just two main moves. Bishop to e3 and knight to g5. Alright, so bishop to e3 was played in a game between Robson and Kaidanov in St. Louis in 2009, the U.S. Championship. And it looks like they were basically testing each other's homework. Both passed and the game was drawn. So I'll give a few more moves. Rook f to d8, rook d to c1, h6 taking over the g5 square, knight to d4. Okay, we can't allow him to leap into c6. Okay, he goes to f5, but that's not such a problem. Bishop f8, takes, bishop d1. And now, not bishop to b6. I'm not sure if it's bishop to b6 just hangs the exchange, because knight e7 check, knight takes d5, bishop f3. So that's the problem with this move. So let's give this some question marks, at least one. Here, takes, bishop f3. Game over. So let's give that 2 question marks. Okay, so bishop f8, and now white takes on c7, but in fact after bishop e6 and then rook to d2, black has fully adequate counterplay thanks to the bishop pair, the active rook, and so on. So it's equal, and black managed to draw without too much difficulty in another 14 moves. Okay, so again, black has to make some accurate moves here after bishop to e3, but if he does, he's okay. So knight to g5 is another try. This was played in a couple of very high-level games. So this is, let's make kind of the mandatory moves here. So black gets rid of white's bishop pair. Okay, king f1, g6. All right, now as I was saying, it was played in a couple of very high-level games. One was Anand against Alon Greenfeld in Haifa in 2000. More recently, in 2011, there was a game between two 2700s, Zahar Efimenko and Fabiano Caruana. Both games were eventually drawn. So I think that black is quite okay here. I mean, again, white has at least, theoretically speaking, some tiny edge, but really not. I mean, this is, as I said, just a draw. Well, okay, it's an even ending. Whether it's a draw depends on the skill of the players, because there are enough imbalances to try. All right, so c takes d4, I think, really doesn't get white anywhere. I mean, if you like an endgame, you can play for that and just grind away, but objectively, you don't get anything. So knight to b3 / knight e4 is the main move. Usually they choose the knight to b3 way of doing things, although as far as I can tell, it doesn't matter. All right, black plays d3, takes, bishop e3, rook d5. All right, now here white has tried 3 moves. He's tried putting both rooks on c1, not at the same time, of course, and c4, trying to create some further weaknesses in the pawn structure. All right, well, let's first dispense with rook a to c1. On this, then knight e5, takes, rook c2, king f7, and black is equal. We'll look at more at endgames like this in a moment. All right, c4 is interesting, but here black doesn't have to be so cooperative. All right, after rook a to c1, if black plays the usual way with knight takes e5, white swaps, and then has lots of weak pawns to go after. I mean, obviously, after knight e5, let's give this a dubious sign here, takes, rook c2. I mean, you can see black's got all these bad pawns here, ready to just collapse. So white is obviously better at this point. But knight to b4, this is the problem. So black can be a little bit mischievous here. So after a3, knight d3, rook c2, and now you don't take on e5 right away. That would just be the same bad thing we were trying to avoid. But king to d7, And now black is ready to play the rook over to b8 and gang up on the b2 pawn. And then the a3 pawn will be weak as well, thanks to its being on a3 rather than on a2. So the bishop on e7 will be eyeing it. So here probably white's best is bishop to c1, but this is just equal. While on bishop to d4, rook b8, bishop c3, maybe the rook swings back to f8. Anyway, black has no problems in this line whatsoever. So this is very good, as long as black remembers to play this knight to b4 idea. That's very important. Okay, the main move is rook f to c1. So now knight e5, knight takes, rook takes, and here white has chosen a couple of moves. So there's both rook takes c2, but also bishop to d4. So on bishop to d4, black should not go passive with rook to g5, protecting the g7 pawn, but instead get active. Rook to e2, king f1, and now bravely play rook to d2. The rook will not be trapped. So on king e1, you have bishop to g5, and if white then plays g3, hoping to play f4, you have rook takes d4 followed by bishop takes c1. So you're okay. White generally plays rook to e3 instead, or bishop to e3, sorry. The rook goes back out, and after rook takes c2, white maybe has, well, I'm not even sure white has an edge. I mean, certainly he has some kind of nominal advantage after king f7 or castles because of the e6 pawn, but it doesn't really seem to be much, and black has done quite well in practice holding such positions. Okay, similarly, there's the immediate rook takes c2, and now again black can choose between castling and king f7. If castles, g3, bishop c5, takes, and rook to d1. And again, it's more equal than not, but white is slightly more comfortable. So I think maybe king f7 is worth considering. Okay, g3 is interesting. If c4, of course, black doesn't allow white to open the position, but plays b4, rook d1, and now rook to d8. Takes, and this is equal. White has no real chance of exploiting the e6 pawn here. Alright, so I'd have to say that d4 is a pretty solid line. I don't see any real way for white to gain a meaningful advantage or a big advantage, although certainly, again, on the other side, black has no winning chances in those lines. Alright, so now we move on to another variation, bishop to g4. And this is a more interesting line, but I think white is better here. Okay, well let's have a look at some variations to try to prove this contention. Okay, after bishop to g4, we play either h3 or rook to e1. Alright, rook e1 is more common, but we can transpose. So for instance, h3, bishop h5, rook e1, queen d7. And now if knight to f1, we'll transpose back to the 12 rook e1 lines. Okay, white can also play knight b3 though. Knight e6, bishop f5, and that's the point of, or one of the points behind h3. In fact, I think I had this position many years ago. I don't have the game anymore, the game score anymore, but I think I played this with black against Amador Rodriguez in a New York Open back in the late 80s. I'm pretty sure it was Amador. I'm not positive, but I think it was him. And yeah, I got ground down in this position with black, or a very similar position. It was in this general line position where h3, bishop h5 had happened. Maybe the knight was on f1. It might have been that. But essentially, this bishop on f5, and it's just, you're constricted. It's difficult to get real counterplay for black here. All right, so from here, okay, black can try a couple things. If he plays knight c to d8, then I think bishop e3, queen e2, and I think white's slightly better here. So again, I mean, he's got this nice mass in the center, and black's queenside counterplay doesn't really look that impressive to me. Okay, so castles is also possible. Queen d3, bishop g6. Okay, if you take here, this is a typical open Rui trick. You take with the f pawn. You could take with the h pawn. It's not terrible, but this is much better. I mean, you get good control over the f file. There aren't any kingside problems for you to worry about. So I like this. I think this is just about equal for black. Maybe white's microscopically better, but I think maybe bishop to e3 immediately is better. And here, again, white might have a very small edge. Nothing too serious, though. Alright, so I would prefer white, but I have to say black is not in that bad a shape. Alright, so rook to e1. This is the main move here. And now black has tried three moves. Queen d7, castles, and d4. And d4 is probably the least common of all of them. I think white has a reasonably comfortable edge in this case. Knight to b3, d3, bishop back to b1. And essentially the following play is really forced. I mean, white is just going to surround this d3 pawn and absorb it, but black will have pretty good control over the light squares. Enough control to have enough counterplay to have pretty good drawing chances. See, here's how it goes. Black takes, okay, bishop f5 protecting, and now bishop to e3. So it's going to stick a piece on d4, put the rook on e3, and collect the d pawn. So there you go. And now, though, black plays c5. And you can see that white's construction in the center really is not that stable. Obviously, you can't play dc5 because you're losing the rook, but that means that you're kind of stuck there, just kind of waiting around for black to come up with whatever he comes up with. The b pawns are doubled. The e5 pawn could be a little bit weak after the c and d pawns get exchanged off. So white, I think, still has whatever little chances there are. Probably the best moves here are h3 and queen c2. So white's for choice, but black, I think, has pretty has reasonable chances to hold. Although again, it's a position where he'll never ever win. He's just going to have to grovel for a draw. All right, second choice, queen to d7. Okay, now if knight to b3, well, we're transposing back into the other line we looked at, knight e6, h3, bishop f5, and so on. So that's what we looked at before with h3 rather than rook to e1. So as I said, there's just tons of transpositions. Okay, so knight f1. This keeps us in mainline territory. Rook to e8, knight e3, bishop h5. Now, white has two main moves here, b4 and knight f5. Okay, we'll start with knight f5. Here, one possibility for black is knight e6. Could also just castle. Now, a4 is just about a novelty. I think it was played once in a really low-level game, and they agreed to a draw 3 moves later. But this might actually be a move worth considering. Anyway, knight e7, excuse me, check, is the main move. Knight takes e7. And now, 3 moves we'll look at. So we'll look at bishop to e3, but very briefly. Bishop e3, knight a4, and that's all I wanted to say about it. I think black is doing fine here. Okay, so the main move is b4. And now, black should play knight to e4. But in one game, black played knight to a4. And this was a mistake. It was played by no less a player than Viktor Korchnoi. But that still doesn't mean it wasn't a mistake. It was, in fact, a big error. Do you see why it's a big error? Well, the answer is bishop takes h7 check. Okay, black should probably just eat the loss of the pawn and hope for the best. But after king takes h7, white won the game in one move. It's not knight to g5 check. If you play knight to g5 check, then king g6, and then you don't have anything concrete. You can play f3, and the position is unclear. I mean, white's got g4 on the agenda, and the king is on g6 after all. But he's not better. So the right move here, and after this, Korchnoi resigns. This is Hübner-Korchnoi, Tilburg 1987, and Korchnoi gave up here. And the reason is that, okay, well, first of all, if f takes e6, then check, and then g4. So we cut off the queen on d7's defense of the g4 square. So here, white gets his material back and just has a raging attack. All right, the key thing is, or a key point is that after bishop takes f3, white wins with queen to d3 check, bishop e4, and now queen to h3 check, picking up the queen. And this is why we're not winning right here with bishop takes h7 check. King h7, okay, now if you play e6, bishop f3, there's no queen to d3 check, because the knight's still on c5. So you see, that's why b4, knight a4 made all the difference there. So here you could play queen c2 check, but bishop e4, and the queen can't swing over to h3. Alright, after rook takes e4, though, it's still kind of tricky. Fe, this is the only good move, but it's sufficient. Rook h4 check, double check, king g8, queen h7, king f7, queen h5, and black can play for the win with g6, and now king f6. King e8, bishop h6 is not as clear, but this seems to be winning. Rook g4, and now e5. And the king is just going to go scooting over horizontally, e6, d6, c6, b7, and he's happy. Alright, That said, though, you could play this sacrifice and just play knight to g5 check, and after king g6, here white has two okay moves. One is e6, the point being that after bishop takes d1, e takes d7, white's threatening two of black's pieces simultaneously, and this is just about even. I mean, maybe black has a micro edge, because the knight on c5 is really good. I mean, if you play bishop to e3, knight a4 is kind of a pain in the neck. So that might give black some little bit of juice, this really good knight on c5. But, you know, and his pieces are a little bit better developed, a little bit more active, though I still think it should be a draw. Okay, a more interesting try for white may be queen to d4, hitting the knight, and after knight e6, the funny-looking move queen to d2. But the threat is to play knight takes e6, queen g5 check, and then take the bishop on h5. So black has to play rook h8, and here white definitely has compensation for the piece, but objectively, maybe black is a tiny bit better. But this could be played. This is tricky and will definitely give black some problems to solve. Anyway, back to back to b4. All right, so we've dispensed with knight to a4. All right, so again, the point was that in this position, okay, yeah, sorry, on bishop takes f3, queen d3. The knight's gone out of the way, and so that wins. All right, so after b4, black needs to play knight e4. All right, and this has occurred in a number of games. After takes, knight g5, bishop g6, e6, rook d3, takes, knight e4. White's up a pawn, but it's not easy for him to keep it. He probably won't be able to keep it, and this looks to be completely equal. And it's occurred in a few high-level games, and black's results are fine. All right, so all of this is just to say that black seems to be quite all right from here in the variation with knight to f5. So b4 right away is the main move. And now black does not play knight to e4 because of knight takes d5. So that seems to be the difference here. So if knight e4, we have this nasty little knight takes d5 trick. So queen d5, takes, bishop e4, and here black is bleeding to death because he's not just, white hasn't just gotten his pawn back, white hasn't just won a pawn, but this skewer is fatal. So that's why knight to e4 is a bad move. Alright, so black plays knight to e6, but now we can play, we go back to the other plan. So you can play knight f5, and, okay, here black castles, a4, bishop g6, g4. Okay, and we're going to see that's another transposition, so the usual move order is g4, and then knight f5, and now castles a4. Alright, so in fact this line I think is really good for white. Rook f to e8, AB. In fact, this might be what I had with Rodriguez. Something very close to this. And, alright, it's not just that he was a better player, this is just a really good position for white. In fact, I think white is probably clearly better here. And he scored very well. White has at least three pretty good moves here. Rook e to a1 may be the best. I think it's the most common. But even just the quiet h3, protecting the g4 pawn, so that way there aren't any tricks where the queen takes on g4 later. Or even rook a7. All of these are good moves. Black is miserable, scrunched up in a box, and I wouldn't want this. I think I gave up the open Rui shortly after this game. At the time, that was considered a main line. Alright, so we just looked at queen to d7, okay, and we've looked at d4 already, so there's also castles. So now knight f1, rook e8, h3, bishop h5, knight g3, bishop g6, knight f5. Okay, if queen d7, g4, knight e6. This occurred in a game between Daniel Stellwachen and I forget his, I think it's Florian Holzke. Played in Germany in 2005. It was drawn 123 moves. We're not going to look at the next 106 moves, though we'll stop at this point and say that this is about equal. Alternatively, black can play bishop to f8, bishop f4, queen d7, knight 3 to h4, rook a to d8, takes, knight d4, takes, knight e6. And here, black is very secure, and he's ready for his thematic break, c5. Alright, don't fear the isolated d-pawn. It's not in any danger at all. Black is tremendously active, and in fact, after bishop to d3, no less a player than Peter Svidler with the white pieces offered Yusupov a draw, and it was accepted. So this, I think, is the way for black to play. I think this gives him better chances. Castling, I think, gives him better chances than queen to d7 does. Although, I wouldn't be surprised if I'm just goofing up and there's some transposition. Well, no. So here, yeah, in this line, black delays queen d7 for quite a while. And I think that added flexibility may help him. Alright, so I think that's just about it. So the rest of what I'm going to show you, I think, is just indicating further transpositions. So instead of bishop to e7, of course, black could play knight to c5, knight b to d2, and now, again, transpositions are possible. So d4, of course, gets back to what we looked at in the Kasparov-Anand game some time ago. But both bishop to e7 and bishop to g4 are transpositions. So, for instance, bishop to e7, bishop c2, okay, and then there's bishop to g4. Well, this will just transpose to this. Alright, so nothing really imaginative there. Okay, going back. Okay, bishop e7, bishop c2. Okay, d4. And again, we have this position, right, and here white can either play cd4, which I said gets nowhere, or play knight to b3, or knight e4, both of which get to the same thing, right? So knight e4, d3, knight c5, etc. Or you could get to it this way. Alright, so we've looked at that. Or bishop to b1, okay, and we've seen this as well. So those are other transpositions, so I neglected to mention that last time, but that too is a transpositional possibility. And okay, back to this, bishop g4, bishop c2. Okay, and here you can play bishop b7, or you can play queen d7, rook e1, bishop e7. It's all the same mess. Well, okay, and then here, remember, I was saying maybe not queen d7, but castling is the best try. Alright, so try not to get lost in that mess of transpositional possibilities. So again, it looks to me like the best try for black here after c3, if you're going to play bishop to e7, is to do this. So knight b to d2, knight c5, bishop c2, bishop g4, or no, sorry, not this, but castling. Yeah, no. Now I'm getting myself lost. Knight c5, bishop c2, bishop g4, rook e1, and now castles. So don't play the queen to d7 line. At least as far as I can tell at this point, it's not the way to go. But castling seems to be all right. And yeah, one more thing I wanted to say. And also, okay, yeah, bishop b7, knight b to d2, and castle seems to be okay as well. This line, bishop c2, f5, knight b to d3, queen d7, knight f to d4, takes, c5, as in the Karyak and Polar game. Although there, as I said, maybe white can get a little bit of an edge. Nothing too serious. I think black is fundamentally okay, but maybe white has some ways of trying for a little bit. So those would be my two suggestions out of this big mass of options. Alright, so with that, I think we're done with the Open Ruy Lopez. Doubtless there are some sidelines that I didn't manage to cover, but hopefully I've given you all the information you need to play this with either side and to have some good chances to either equalize with black or get an edge with white and to kind of understand what's going on as well. Alright, so next time I'm not sure what we're up to, if we're going to go into like the Archangelsk and Neo-Archangelsk variations and the Mahler and that complex, or if I'll pull up some other line and then maybe save that massively theoretical system for later. Anyway, that does it for the Open Ruy. I'll see you later. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.